Good evening, viewers. This is D.Informative, an important edition of D.Informative, and I am Sricharan. According to the government and the latest data, the growth rate of India is by 13.4% in the first quarter. The numbers seem huge. The growth seems fine and great. I'm really happy with the double digit of GDP growth, viewers. GDP of China has grown up only and only by 0.4%, and that of US has come down by 1.6%. There's a lot more to decode, viewers. Let's understand what GDP looks like. Let's decode the complete GDP, and also, viewers, let's also understand what is inflation. What are the effects of inflation on us? And a lot more about inflation. It's going to be a packed edition, viewers. GDP can be impacted by few measures, first being the consumer inflation. In June, it was 7%, whereas in July, it was 6.7%. So this tells us that the worst is away. Worst is just an history. When discussed about this with few economists, they say that the inflation had peaked in April. So that's a good news for all of us. Whereas the latest numbers on retail inflation tells us that it has again risen up by 7%. It's up to 7%. What's inflation? I'll tell you as we proceed through the video, viewers. That's the most important topic which we are going to speak on. The second point which impacts the GDP is the PMI in the manufacturing industry. PMI means Purchasing Managers Index. And this in June was 53.9%, whereas in July it was 56.4%. So that really and clearly says that manufacturing is increasing in India. And the sources say that this is the quickest in the last 8 months. These are few points which impact the GDP growth, whereas the GDP predicted rate for India is 7.4%, which is way ahead of other developing nations. China's predicted GDP growth rate, or the predicted rate, is around just 3.3%. But viewers, all these numbers and statistics feels good, makes us happy. But let me tell you why the growth is so big. The growth rate is much higher compared to other countries. GDP growth rate of the first quarter of 2022 is always compared with the first quarter of 2021. So in 2021, we were worst, horrible in terms of the economy. India was hit bad by the second wave of COVID, which led to disasters, deaths, and serious panic, and thus shutting down industries. So when we compare the growth rate with the first quarter of 2021, it seems to be good because the base comparison which we are doing was not good, was quite bad and horrible. The point is in the further quarter to come, viewers. If we look at a positive growth rate, then the nation seems quite good and cool. But if there is the GDP coming down, if we see something like that going through the months, then it's going to be difficult for all of us. Now, viewers, let's understand what is inflation and how can an individual protect himself economically. What's inflation? The base question. Inflation, in simple terms, is inflating something. And in economy, it means inflating the value of the currency. I'll give you a real-time scenario which will make you understand things much better. You all would have come across a scenario where your salary seems to be low for fulfilling your expenses, which means your income seems to be much lower than your expenses. Also, you would have come across a scenario in the recent past of the increase in unemployment, and even if a person gets employment, he or she is not able to meet the expenses, which means salary seems to be low. All these scenarios are just the symptoms of nation diving into a pool of inflation. One more example to understand this clearly, viewers. Let's consider that you have 100 rupees and you go to buy a product which costs rupees 100. But after 2 or 3 months, you go to the same shop to buy the same product, and now the shopkeeper charges you 110 rupees. So the product which you were getting it for 100 rupees, now you cannot buy it at the same price. You need to give 10 rupees extra. This is the effect of inflation. Now, when we have clearly understood inflation, let's try to understand what are the different types in them. Why should we understand this? It's simple. It's because we have to know what's happening around us to find a required solution. There are four types of inflation, and most of them explain the two types of inflation, which are common. The first type of inflation is the cost push inflation. Second one, demand pull inflation. Third one, supply shock. And fourth one, built-in inflation. When we look at the first type of inflation, viewers, the cost push inflation. This happens when the cost of manufacturing increases. In this type of inflation, the cost of the raw materials or the manufacturing cost increases, thus increasing the cost of the product. For example, we have seen the crude oil prices, which were sky high during the Russia-Ukraine war, and thus increasing the prices of petrol and diesel across the world, across the globe. In demand push inflation, the demand increases with respect to the supply of a certain product. When demand increases, the person who pays more gets the product much easily, thus increasing the prices of the product. This is called demand push inflation. Supply shock. If the supply of any product to a particular area decreases, then the prices usually tend to increase and thus creating inflated price index. Built-in inflation, this is a cyclic process, viewers. If the price of a product increases, then the employee asks for an increase in salary. If he or she gets an increase in salary, they start buying more, they start the expenditure increases. As a result of that, as a person starts buying more, the product price again increases, and this becomes a cyclic process. Now, viewers, after listening to inflation, you would certainly think that the news, media, and social media are using this to get views, to get the best thumbnails out there. They are spreading fear. But viewers, let me tell you that we as a true media for the people aren't here to just spread false news and panic. But we as the youngest team in Indian journalism are here to let you know the truth. The level of inflation is worse in other countries too, viewers. In India, Snapchat is planned to cut 20% of their staff, citing inflation as a reason. In Australia, inflation has led to public health crisis. Eurozone inflation hits a peak of 9.1% in August. And according to IMF, this is not what I am saying, viewers, according to IMF, three countries are to be hit badly due to the Russia-Ukraine war crisis, and those are Hungary, Slovakia, and Czech Republic. Also, according to IMF, they could shrink by 3 to 6%. That's their economy could shrink by 3 to 6%. Germany could lose $225 billion in 2 years due to Russia's supply cut. So the world is under a financial crisis, and that's called inflation. I'll wrap up this edition with one of the key phrases used by renowned economists. We have seen people say, if I have money, then I have a lot of value. But if everyone has money, then money has less value. Thank you, viewers. Thank you for watching me. Until the next time, I meet you all. Signing off. Sricharan. Thank you, viewers.